unwieldy.
It's difficult to always remember that diamonds are stones, so they're very heavy.
Yes. Fortunately, my father and I have about the same sort of shaped head. But once you put it on, it stays. I mean, it just remains itself.
You have to keep your head very still.
Yes. And you can't look down to read the speech. You have to take the speech up. Because if you did, your neck would break. It'd fall off.
Get out of her room. Those 5 words allegedly cut through the silence inside Windsor Castle with such force that even seasoned members of the royal household stopped where they stood. According to palace rumors that later spread among staff, Prince William had just learned that discussions were already underway about giving Queen Camilla control over the late Queen Elizabeth's private room. It was not a ceremonial chamber. It was not a state apartment. It was the one place almost no outsider had ever seen. And if the whispers were true, William was about to make a move that no one inside the palace expected. No announcement had been made. No photographs had leaked. Officially, nothing unusual was happening. Yet behind heavy wooden doors, confidential conversations were reportedly taking place between senior household officials, legal advisors, and trusted members of the king's inner circle. The proposal was described as practical. Some believed the room should finally be brought into use after remaining untouched for years. Others quietly feared something much larger was unfolding. They believed this was not simply about moving furniture. It was about who would ultimately shape Queen Elizabeth's legacy.
To help others, be it through delivering food parcels and medicines, checking on neighbors, or converting businesses to help the relief effort. And though self-isolating may at times be hard, many people of all faiths and of none are discovering that it presents an opportunity to slow down, pause and reflect in prayer or meditation.
The atmosphere changed the moment William was privately informed. Instead of reacting publicly, he reportedly cancelled several scheduled engagements and requested immediate access to documents connected to the room's preservation. Staff who witnessed the sudden change later claimed they had never seen the prince move so quickly over an internal palace matter. Something about this particular room had triggered an entirely different response. Whatever he had been told convinced him that waiting even one more day could be a mistake. If you believe William was right to step in before Queen Elizabeth's private room was changed, don't just watch in silence. Like this video, subscribe, and share it, because every click helps keep stories like this alive. Walking away without supporting them only makes it easier for these moments to disappear from the conversation. Hi viewers! If you were Prince William, and someone tried to change your grandmother's most private room against what you believed were her wishes, would you have stepped in immediately or stayed out of it? Comment "I would protect it" or "I would stay out of it." I really want to know where you stand. According to persistent palace speculation, the room in question had remained exactly as Queen Elizabeth left it during her final years. Long-serving members of the household reportedly treated it with unusual care, entering only when absolutely necessary. Dust was removed with remarkable precision. Curtains were opened and closed according to long-established routines. Even small decorative items were said to remain in the same positions they had occupied for years. To many inside Windsor, the room represented something that could never be replaced. It was one of the last physical reminders of a monarch whose reign had stretched across generations. That was why the rumors spread so quickly. One staff member reportedly overheard conversations suggesting that the room might soon become part of a wider plan to reorganize several royal apartments. Another claimed new measurements had quietly been requested. Someone else insisted unfamiliar designers had already begun reviewing nearby spaces. None of these reports could be independently confirmed, but together they created an unsettling picture. Within days, whispers echoed through servant corridors, administrative offices, and private waiting rooms. Everyone seemed to know something, yet no one appeared willing to speak openly. William reportedly noticed the growing unease before anyone explained its cause. Experienced royal aides rarely allowed emotion to show, Yet several appeared unusually cautious whenever the late Queen's private quarters were mentioned.
Don't find many ebonies all over the world. Where do you find a riding stable in the middle of a city?
I know.
You know, which are teaching all these young people to ride, which otherwise they wouldn't get the chance.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think it is a unique, very, very special place.
And I was just mentioning about the expansion. They're building a second site in Southwark. It's clear that it's a success, given that they're expanding.
You're never going to be able to build another one unless the first one's been a success. So it's getting bigger and better all the time. So.
And we have seen firsthand from Ebony real success stories, so therefore...
Small conversations stopped as he entered rooms. Papers were quietly turned face down. Even routine meetings seemed strangely tense. These subtle changes were enough to convince him that important decisions were being discussed without his knowledge. Instead of confronting anyone immediately, William allegedly chose another path. He began asking simple questions. Who authorized the latest reviews? Which offices had requested access? Why were household archivists suddenly examining records connected to one specific suite inside Windsor Castle? Each answer only produced more uncertainty. Officials referred him elsewhere. Advisors claimed procedures were still under review. Others insisted no final decisions had been made. Yet the reluctance to provide direct answers only deepened his suspicions. Then came the moment that reportedly changed everything. During one private briefing, an experienced household official quietly revealed that discussions had progressed much further than William had been led to believe. According to palace insiders, preliminary arrangements were already being explored in anticipation of transferring responsibility for the room. Whether those discussions were merely administrative or something more significant remained unclear, but hearing those words reportedly transformed William's concern into immediate action. He ended the meeting without raising his voice, without making public accusations, without criticizing anyone. Instead, he issued one calm instruction that instantly altered the atmosphere inside the palace. Every document connected to Queen Elizabeth's private room was to be located immediately. Household inventories, historical records, private correspondence logs, preservation agreements, staff access reports. Nothing was to be overlooked. Officials later claimed that what began as a routine review quickly exposed something no one had expected.
And I want to reassure you that if we remain united and resolute, then we will overcome it. I hope in the years to come, everyone will be able to take pride in how they responded to this challenge. And those who come after us will say the Britons of this generation were as strong as any, that the attributes of self-discipline, of quiet, good-humoured resolve, and of fellow feeling still characterize this country. The pride in whom...
Several files matched perfectly. Others raised uncomfortable questions, but one particular record appeared to have vanished entirely. No explanation was offered. No replacement copy could be found, and as William quietly waited for answers, those closest to the investigation reportedly realized they were no longer dealing with a disagreement over a room. They were standing at the beginning of a mystery that someone inside the palace seemed determined to keep buried. Inside the dim, climate-controlled vaults beneath Windsor Castle, an archivist's gloved hand paused over a heavy, leather-bound ledger. The whisper had already reached the lower levels before the dust had even settled on Prince William's sudden demand. For decades, these subterranean rooms had held the quietest secrets of the British monarchy, stored in meticulous order away from public scrutiny. But as the researcher flipped through the microfiche logs from the late Queen's personal estate records, a single-page reference showed signs of a fresh, deliberate tear along the spine. Someone had accessed the confidential inventory files only 48 hours earlier, leaving behind a blank entry where a crucial document number ought to have been. The missing file was not a routine maintenance record. It was the master registration code for the personal items housed within Queen Elizabeth's private bedroom suite. Upstairs, the atmosphere across the private corridors had turned remarkably cold. Prince William walked through the grand gallery toward the domestic quarters, his boots making no sound on the runner rugs. He did not call a formal meeting with the Lord Chamberlain. nor did he request a public gathering of the royal household. Instead, he stopped directly outside the high oak doors that led to his late grandmother's private sitting room. A long-serving housemaid stood nearby, holding a tray of polished silver that remained completely still in her hands. She did not speak, but the subtle shift in her expression revealed everything.
So with this constant news of tragedy and bad news how do you keep optimistic?
Well, as we've seen today, the Earthshot winners and the finalists create that inspiration, that optimism. And I think we've got to hang on to optimism and hope, because it is the biggest driver of change, it is the biggest driver of innovation. I think if we remark on how so pessimistic and doom and gloom everything is, even though there is a healthy dose of that needed to make sure.
The quiet understanding among the staff was already cracking under the pressure of incoming orders. For 70 years, that room had functioned as the emotional heart of the British monarchy. It was where Queen Elizabeth had written her private letters, reviewed secret government red boxes, and spent her briefest moments of true solitude. Every chair, every framed photograph, and every piece of worn upholstery carried the physical weight of modern history. The room had not been designed for display or administrative efficiency. It was a deeply personal sanctuary, preserved by staff who viewed its upkeep as a sacred obligation rather than a daily assignment. The inkwell on the small mahogany writing desk still held the faint residue of the late monarch's preferred dark blue ink. The small porcelain clock on the mantelpiece was still wound by hand every Sunday morning at precisely 8 o'clock. That meticulous preservation was precisely why the sudden arrival of external assessors had sent shockwaves through the castle corridors. Less than 72 hours before William's intervention, 2 senior interior consultants, accompanied by an administrative aide linked to Queen Camilla's executive team, had been seen entering the suite with digital measuring tools and floor plans. They spent nearly 40 minutes inside, taking notes on structural dimensions, natural lighting, and adjoining access doors. To the staff who had guarded the space since September 2022, the presence of those consultants felt like a profound betrayal. Now, if you are sitting there watching this, and you can honestly say you would stand by while your own grandmother's final personal boundary was quietly erased for convenience, then perhaps this story is not for you. But if you have any respect for family honor, for promises made to those who can no longer speak for themselves, you need to hit that subscribe button right now. Do not just watch from the sidelines while history gets rewritten behind closed doors. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and take a stand for the truth before it is erased completely. The official justification behind the proposed changes had been framed as a practical necessity. Modernizing a historic palace required maximum efficiency, and allowing a prime suite of central apartments to sit completely dormant was viewed by some advisors as an unnecessary waste of royal real estate. Queen Camilla's inner team reportedly believed that establishing a clear, functional presence in Windsor Castle was vital for establishing the new reign's operational footing. From a purely administrative standpoint, rearranging the living quarters made complete sense. The palace was not a static museum, it was a working headquarters that needed to adapt to a new era. Yet, as William discreetly expanded his inquiries, he discovered that the push to reassign the suite was far more advanced than anyone had admitted. Inquiries sent to the Royal Collection Trust revealed that several historical artifacts from the bedroom had already been marked for cataloguing and potential transfer to secure storage facilities in London. The move was being handled under the guise of routine conservation work, but the timing raised immediate alarms. If the items were removed for conservation, the room would effectively be cleared, opening the door for immediate physical renovation before any formal opposition could be organized. William requested a private audience with a retired household administrator who had served the late Queen for over 30 years. The meeting took place in a windowless office far removed from the main state apartments. The old staff member spoke in hushed tones, carefully choosing every word. According to his account, Queen Elizabeth had been extraordinarily deliberate about the management of her personal spaces during her final years. She was fully aware of how administrative priorities could shift after her death, and she had taken specific, highly confidential steps to ensure her private quarters would not simply be carved up or repurposed at the whim of incoming officials. The administrator recalled a specific afternoon shortly before the Queen's passing, when a legal advisor was summoned to Windsor Castle without the usual entry logs being filed at the main gate. That meeting had involved the signing of private, non-state instructions, specifically covering her personal belongings and immediate living spaces. However, when William asked where those signed instructions were stored, the former administrator could only point toward the central archive room, the very same location where the crucial ledger page had just been discovered, torn from its binding. The absence of that document created an immediate administrative deadlock. Without the official preservation paper, the proposal to reassign the suite to Queen Camilla could proceed under standard Crown property protocols. The advisors pushing for modernization argued that in the absence of explicit, legally binding documentation within the active estate files, the current monarch and his consort held absolute authority over room assignments. They maintained that sentimentality could not dictate the long-term management of royal residences. William refused to accept the administrative explanation. He personally walked to the archive storage rooms, accompanied by his own legal representative. He demanded a complete, line-by-line audit of every document checked out of the Historical Records Division over the past 6 months. The archivists worked through the night under direct instruction, pulling physical files, digital access logs, and security camera footage from the subterranean storage corridors. The tension within the department was palpable. Every staff member understood that a single misstep could end their career, yet the loyalty to the late Queen's memory proved far stronger than fear of administrative reprisal. By sunrise, the audit revealed a critical piece of information. The ledger page had not been destroyed. It had been checked out under a temporary administrative hold by a high-ranking palace official who claimed the file was needed for routine legal review regarding Crown estate property taxes. The file had never been returned to its designated box, effectively hiding its existence from anyone conducting a standard computer search. As the morning light hit the stone walls of Windsor, William gathered his core team of advisors inside his private study. He placed a signed order on the table that strictly prohibited any individual, regardless of rank or administrative authority, from removing a single item from Queen Elizabeth's private suite. He instructed the castle security detail to change the electronic access codes on the outer doors immediately, effectively locking out external contractors, interior designers, and administrative personnel until further notice. The move was unprecedented. It directly challenged the authority of the officials managing the transition for the king and queen consort. Rumors swept through the palace offices within hours. Senior aides were seen moving rapidly between the king's private office and the legal department, carrying thick folders and speaking in low, urgent tones. The delicate balance of power within the royal household had been completely shattered by William's uncompromising stance. A quiet message was soon relayed to William's office from an archivist who had stayed behind after the overnight audit. Deep within an uncatalogued storage chest containing personal correspondence from the late Queen's private secretary, the archivist had spotted a reference to a second, identical copy of the preservation instructions. The entry noted that the duplicate had been placed inside a locked dispatch box that had not been opened since September 2022. The discovery offered a narrow ray of hope, but it also raised the stakes dramatically. Opening a sealed royal dispatch box required explicit legal clearance and the physical presence of senior estate trustees. If William forced the issue, it would turn an internal administrative disagreement into an open, legal confrontation within the highest levels of the palace establishment. Instead of backing down, William issued an immediate, non-negotiable directive that reverberated through every department of Windsor Castle. No furniture was to be moved, no measurements were to be taken, and no reassignment of Queen Elizabeth's private room would occur until that sealed dispatch box was brought before a full committee of royal trustees. The battle for the late Queen's legacy was no longer a quiet matter of palace rumors. It was now an active, high-stakes standoff behind closed doors, and William had just drawn a line that no one inside the palace dared to cross. The heavy mahogany door of the private conference room slammed shut, the sharp sound echoing through the cold stone corridor of Windsor Castle as senior legal advisors scrambled to gather their documents. Prince William stood at the head of the polished table, his hands planted firmly on the dark wood, eyes fixed on the palace lawyers who had just attempted to dismiss his directive as a mere procedural misunderstanding. The air inside the room was suffocating, thick with the silence of high-ranking officials who suddenly realized they were no longer dealing with routine administrative balance, but with a direct power struggle over the late Queen's personal estate. Across the table, a legal representative aligned with the Royal Household's Modernization Committee quietly pulled back his papers, refusing to meet the prince's gaze. Outside the locked room, long-serving household staff stood frozen in the hallways, pretending to polish antique brass sconces and check door locks while listening intently to the muffled, tense exchanges inside. Every person who wore the palace uniform understood what was happening behind those thick wooden doors. This was no longer a quiet debate over square footage or decorative preferences. It was an open, high-stakes confrontation over who possessed the true authority to govern Queen Elizabeth's private quarters, and how far certain factions were willing to go to reshape the physical reality of the monarchy. Inside the meeting room, the confrontation escalated with ruthless precision. Legal advisors representing the Crown Estate insisted that under historical royal protocol, the reigning sovereign holds absolute administrative jurisdiction over all living quarters within active royal palaces. They argued that Queen Camilla's proposed reorganization of the central suite was entirely within standard operational frameworks, designed to streamline efficiency for the new reign. According to their written briefs, allowing key apartments to sit dormant out of sentimental attachment created an administrative precedent that could destabilize future property decisions across all royal residences. William did not raise his voice, but the sharpness of his response cut through their arguments like a razor. He reminded every lawyer present that the private rooms in question were not simply empty spaces awaiting a new occupant. They were the preserved personal sanctuary of a monarch who had served for 70 years, containing confidential personal documents, historic items, and private journals that had never been catalogued by the state. He made it undeniably clear that overriding the late Queen's personal arrangements without full, transparent verification of her private directives was a catastrophic error in judgment that threatened the integrity of the institution itself. While the lawyers argued protocol, Queen Camilla's inner circle of advisors pushed back with equal determination behind the scenes. According to persistent palace rumors, Camilla viewed the resistance as an unnecessary obstacle created by an overprotective inner circle trying to dictate the terms of the king's household. Her team reportedly maintained that the monarchy could not remain frozen in time, trapped by the ghost of the past, while trying to project strength and modern relevance to a changing world. They believed that taking control of the suite was a practical, necessary step to assert operational order and clear out decades of accumulated, uncatalogued domestic clutter. King Charles found himself caught directly in the eye of the storm, forced to balance his loyalty to his wife's vision for a streamlined household against his eldest son's fierce determination to protect his late mother's memory. Private conversations between the king and William were described by palace insiders as intensely emotional yet deeply restrained. Charles, known for his respect for tradition, was reportedly reluctant to cause an open rift among his closest advisors, yet he could not ignore the raw emotional power of William's arguments. Every time the king attempted to suggest a middle ground, William produced detailed inventory lists showing how rapidly items had already been catalogued for removal behind the family's back. Now, if you can watch this unfold and honestly feel nothing, if you can turn away while a family's most sacred private legacy is systematically dismantled by corporate-minded advisors, then perhaps you do not care about honor at all. But if you believe that a grandmother's final wishes deserve total, absolute protection, regardless of title or power, you need to hit that subscribe button right now. Do not stand by in silence while history is manipulated by those who think they are above accountability. Subscribe today, turn on your notifications, and make sure your voice is counted among those who still value truth and loyalty over administrative convenience. Down in the lower corridors of the castle, the palace staff began quietly mounting their own subtle resistance. Long-serving housekeepers, maintenance workers, and archivists who had spent decades serving Queen Elizabeth began deliberately slowing down the logistical preparations for the room's proposed handover. Request forms for furniture-moving crates were suddenly misplaced. Key handovers were delayed due to administrative verification checks. Environmental control logs for the suite were suddenly subjected to lengthy, mandatory safety audits. The staff could not openly challenge high-ranking officials, but through sheer bureaucratic friction, they bought Prince William precious time to find the evidence he needed. During the third hour of the tense legal negotiations, a long-serving administrative aide who had worked in the late Queen's private office for over 25 years quietly stepped into the back of the conference room. He waited until a brief pause fell over the room before leaning down to whisper to William's personal secretary. The aide had just returned from a remote storage annex in the deep basements of the castle, a forgotten archive vault where older, uncatalogued personal boxes from the Queen's final years at Windsor were kept under heavy security locks. The aide revealed that during a routine shelf audit conducted 3 years prior, a heavy, leather-bound dispatch box belonging to the late Queen's private secretary had been misplaced inside a mislabeled wooden crate. That box, marked with a specific wax seal that had not been broken since late 2022, was believed to contain the original, unedited private estate notes written by Queen Elizabeth herself regarding the long-term preservation of her personal apartments. Unlike the state files that had gone missing from the central archives, this box had remained entirely untouched, hidden away from administrative personnel, legal advisors, and estate planners. The revelation sent an immediate shockwave through the room. The legal team representing the modernization proposal immediately attempted to challenge the status of the box, arguing that any unverified documents found outside official state registration channels could not be legally binding on the current monarch. They insisted that proceeding with the reassignment of the suite was still the standard course of action until formal legal proof was presented through the proper parliamentary channels. William immediately shut down their objections. He did not ask for permission, nor did he enter into further debate. He stood up from the table, gathered his papers, and informed the assembled lawyers and advisors that all administrative actions regarding Queen Elizabeth's private suite were suspended with immediate effect. He declared that no consultant, no estate manager, and no member of any royal household would be granted physical or legal access to the room until that sealed dispatch box was officially brought up from the basement vault and opened in the presence of independent legal trustees. The room fell into an uncomfortable absolute silence as William turned and walked out, leaving the senior officials in a state of quiet panic. The advisors who had pushed so hard to finalize the transfer of the suite were suddenly forced to reckon with the reality that their carefully laid plans were hanging by a thread. The narrative they had constructed to justify the modernization was crumbling under the weight of a hidden box that no one had anticipated. Word of the discovery spread through the palace within minutes, sparking intense speculation among senior aides and domestic staff alike. Heavy security was immediately posted outside the door of the basement archive room, preventing anyone from entering or leaving without explicit written authorization from Prince William's personal office. The air inside Windsor Castle grew colder, heavy with suspense as staff and officials waited for the dispatch box to be retrieved. As night fell over the castle grounds, the heavy wooden crate containing the sealed dispatch box was carefully transported up from the subterranean vaults under armed escort. The box was placed on a central table inside a private, secure reading room, its darkened leather and unbroken red wax seal gleaming under the low overhead lights. Senior household officials, legal representatives, and palace archivists gathered around the table in tense anticipation, aware that whatever rested inside those historic walls could instantly alter the power balance of the monarchy. Yet, as the legal trustees stepped forward with the key, no one present could say for certain what final instructions Queen Elizabeth had left behind, or whether those words would save her private sanctuary or ignite an even greater storm within the royal family. The bronze key turned in the antique lock with a heavy, metallic click that echoed off the cold stone walls of the secure reading room. Senior legal trustees, high-ranking household advisors, and Prince William stood in complete, rigid silence as the lid of the dark leather dispatch box was slowly lifted. Inside lay several pristine folders of personal stationery bearing Queen Elizabeth II's official crest, untouched by air or light since the final weeks of her reign. The delicate scent of aged paper filled the small space, instantly shifting the atmosphere from administrative legal argument to profound emotional weight. On top of the stack rested a series of handwritten notes and formal estate editions, preserved exactly as the late monarch had ordered before her passing. An independent legal archivist, wearing white cotton gloves, carefully lifted the top folder and began reading the confidential entries aloud. The documents were devastatingly precise. They included exhaustive inventory lists detailing every personal artifact, framed family photograph, and handwritten notebook contained within her private bedroom and adjoining sitting room at Windsor Castle. Every single item had been catalogued with meticulous care, accompanied by explicit notes regarding its historical origin and emotional meaning. It was not merely a list of possessions. It was a deeply personal inventory of a lifetime spent in service to the crown, written by a monarch who understood that after her departure, bureaucratic convenience might attempt to erase the boundaries of her private life. As the archivist turned to the third page, the tone of the meeting shifted from quiet curiosity to intense psychological shock. Queen Elizabeth had written clear, direct instructions regarding the long-term preservation of her private quarters. The text explicitly directed that her bedroom and sitting room were to remain in their original state, designated as preserved historical archives under the custody of a specific, independent trust, rather than standard domestic palace allocation. She had anticipated that future administrative reorganizations might seek to repurpose the space, and she had taken deliberate steps to shield her private refuge from being carved up, modernized, or reassigned to incoming members of the household. The room remained absolutely silent as the full weight of the discovery set in. Prince William stood motionless, his expression resolute as the legal team representing the modernization push stared at the pages in utter disbelief. The narrative that had been built over weeks, the argument that no formal directives existed to protect the room, was completely shattered in a matter of seconds. The missing ledger page from the subterranean archives was no longer relevant. The duplicate instructions sitting on the table were clear, legally binding, and backed by the personal authority of the longest reigning monarch in British history. The legal advisors aligned with Queen Camilla's team attempted a swift, desperate pivot. According to palace insiders, they raised subtle arguments regarding the exact legal interpretation of the estate notes, suggesting that certain clauses might be viewed as advisory rather than strictly binding under current Crown property laws. They questioned whether the trust outlined in the handwritten notes had been formally chartered before the Queen's passing, implying that a technicality could still leave the ultimate decision in the hands of the reigning sovereign. William did not engage in a prolonged legal debate. He picked up the signed document, walked out of the reading room, and requested an immediate, private meeting with King Charles. The meeting took place behind closed doors in the King's personal study, far removed from the bustling staff corridors and administrative offices. The atmosphere was described as extraordinarily tense, marked by a profound generational confrontation over family loyalty, institutional duty, and the preservation of history. During the closed-door meeting, William laid the original handwritten notes directly on his father's desk. He did not issue threats, nor did he frame the situation as a personal conflict with Queen Camilla. Instead, he presented the situation in stark, undeniable terms. Overriding the late Queen's explicit written directions would not simply be an administrative decision, it would be a direct betrayal of her final wishes, an act that, if leaked to the public, would inflict irreparable damage on the moral authority of the new reign. He emphasized that the monarchy's strength rested on trust, continuity, and respect for tradition, and that stripping away Queen Elizabeth's private sanctuary for practical convenience sent a dangerous message to the nation. Now, if you can listen to this and still justify wiping away a late grandmother's explicit final wishes just to satisfy modern vanity, then you are turning your back on basic human decency. If you believe that true loyalty means protecting the memory of those who built the very world we live in, you need to hit that subscribe button right now. Do not stand by passively while convenience trumps honor. Subscribe immediately. Enable all notifications and make sure you are heard whenever history is threatened by quiet compliance. King Charles was reportedly deeply moved and visibly shaken as he read through his mother's handwritten notes. The emotional reality of her words, written during her final months while facing declining health, forced a profound reckoning. Charles had spent his entire life upholding the weight of royal duty, and seeing his mother's personal plea preserved on paper made it impossible to continue backing the modernization proposal. The realization hit him that allowing any changes to the suite would create an internal shadow over his own reign, casting him as a monarch who failed to protect his mother's legacy within his own home. However, the administrative conflict was not entirely over. Across the palace, those pushing for the room's reassignment realized their position was rapidly slipping away. Rumors circulated that Camilla's team considered making one final administrative appeal, suggesting that while the main sitting room could remain preserved, the adjoining utility spaces and smaller anterooms could still be partitioned and annexed for operational use. They argued that partial adaptation would honor the spirit of the instruction while still meeting the logistical needs of the active household. William caught wind of this final maneuver before it could reach the formal planning committee. Recognizing that any compromise would open the door to gradual, quiet encroachment over time, he prepared one final, decisive move. He summoned the head of the Royal Collection Trust, the chief palace archivist, and the senior trustee of Queen Elizabeth's personal estate to a private briefing. He instructed them to draft an immediate, unalterable preservation order that would lock the entire suite, including all adjoining anterooms, under permanent heritage protection. By late afternoon, news of the impending preservation order sent shockwaves through the administrative offices of Windsor Castle. Staff members who had quietly supported William's efforts could barely contain their relief, while officials who had championed the room's conversion faced the embarrassing reality of total defeat. The atmosphere inside the castle was thick with quiet anticipation, as everyone waited to see if King Charles would officially sign the final preservation order, or if a last-minute intervention would stall the process once again. William stood in the upper gallery overlooking the castle courtyard, holding the newly drafted Heritage Protection Agreement in his hand. He was only moments away from delivering the document for final signature. The weeks of quiet investigation, tense legal battles, and internal palace maneuvering had all led to this single, critical threshold. As he turned to walk down the hallway toward the king's private office, a senior household aide approached him with an urgent message, warning that one final, unexpected obstacle had just been raised by the Crown estate planners. The senior estate trustee brought his heavy wooden gavel down onto the mahogany table, the deep crack echoing across the stateroom with absolute, uncompromising finality. Inside the private study, the air was cold and motionless as Prince William stepped forward, placing the freshly executed Heritage Protection Decree directly into the center of the official red leather binder. King Charles sat silently behind his desk, holding a vintage gold pen that had once belonged to his mother. With a slow, deliberate motion, the king pressed the nib to the thick parchment, signing his royal approval across the bottom line. The administrative challenge raised by estate planners was instantly crushed. Queen Elizabeth's private suite was officially locked under permanent heritage protection, shielded forever from modern hands, internal reassignments, and administrative ambition. The immediate reaction across Windsor Castle was a silent, overwhelming wave of shock. Outside in the grand corridors, word spread within seconds, from private secretaries to housekeepers waiting with linen carts. Household staff who had spent decades serving the late monarch traded subtle, knowing glances, while high-ranking officials aligned with Queen Camilla's modernization team gathered their folders in uncomfortable silence. The proposal to reassign the private bedroom and sitting room was completely, permanently abandoned. The room was not going to be measured for new carpets. The furniture was not going to be moved to London storage vaults. The quiet sanctuary of Queen Elizabeth II remained entirely unbroken. For Queen Camilla, the outcome marked a quiet, yet severe institutional defeat behind palace doors. According to persistent palace speculation, her inner circle of advisors felt deeply frustrated by how swiftly Prince William had neutralized their operational plans. They had viewed the reorganization as a practical, modern necessity to streamline the castle's living arrangements for the new reign. Instead, they were left with a stark public and private reality. William had drawn an unyielding line in the sand, demonstrating that when it came to preserving the legacy of his grandmother, his influence over the institution was absolute and non-negotiable. The quiet victory reshaped the psychological power dynamics within the royal household. Senior aides who had previously assumed that the new reign would easily sweep away the old administrative structures suddenly realized that William was actively monitoring every subtle shift. His decisive intervention proved that he was not merely waiting in the wings as an heir apparent, but acting as an aggressive, watchful protector of the late Queen's memory. The message sent to every palace department was undeniably clear. Tradition and honor would not be traded for administrative convenience while he had a say. Down in the quiet hallway leading to the late Queen's private suite, the physical atmosphere felt lighter, almost sacred. A long-serving housekeeper, who had quietly delayed moving crates days earlier, carefully adjusted the small brass plate outside the oak door. Inside, everything remained precisely as it had been left on the day Queen Elizabeth departed. The small porcelain clock continued its steady, comforting ticking on the mantelpiece. The dark blue inkwell remained on the mahogany writing desk. The curtains, held open by silk ropes, allowed the soft afternoon sunlight to filter across the untouched room, casting a warm glow over a space that had witnessed 7 decades of British history. Now, if you can watch a grandson risk everything to stand up for his late grandmother's final wishes and still feel nothing, then you need to ask yourself what values you truly hold. If you believe that honor, loyalty, and standing up against administrative overreach still means something in this world, then do not walk away now. Click that subscribe button immediately, turn on all notifications, and make sure your voice joins the millions who refuse to let truth and sacred promises be quietly swept under the rug. The preserved room now stands as a powerful, permanent symbol of historical continuity between generations. It serves as a physical reminder that while reigns change and modernizers push for efficiency, there are certain boundaries that must never be crossed. Prince William's refusal to yield ensured that Queen Elizabeth's private refuge remained a living sanctuary rather than a forgotten footnote in palace logistics. Her final written instructions, discovered in that hidden leather dispatch box in the deep archives, had done exactly what she intended. They protected her legacy from being quietly rewritten behind closed doors. Yet as the dust began to settle over Windsor Castle, senior archivists examining the surrounding subterranean vaults uncovered something far more unsettling. While reviewing the inventory logs connected to Queen Elizabeth's private estate, researchers stumbled upon a second, identical leather dispatch box resting inside an undisclosed storage safe at Balmoral Castle. Unlike the box at Windsor, this second container bore a confidential security classification stamp that had never been cleared for historical audit, accompanied by a handwritten seal that explicitly prohibited its opening until 5 years after her passing. Preliminary cataloging entries suggest that this second box contains detailed personal notes regarding an entirely different set of private instructions. Directives that do not concern palace rooms or furniture, but rather explicit personal wishes regarding the management of private royal titles and long-held royal secrets that could completely upend the public perception of several senior family members. Rumors are already swirling through confidential palace channels that Prince William has already requested early access to the Balmoral vaults, determined to secure the contents before anyone else learns what his grandmother wrote down in her final hours. You cannot afford to miss what happens next. Subscribe now, because the chilling truth hiding inside that second box is about to change everything you thought you knew about the royal family.